Hey, welcome back my friends, Karlis here. Yes, so, moving on with the stress management week. Alright, next question. How to deal with stressors? Good question. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm so happy when I get these questions and get help and I get the chance to add some value. Very nice. So, stress management. We already talked about what is stress in the first video, which is essentially available physical energy. Very short, plain. We already talked about the effects of stress on our health. In short, it's bad, chronic, long-term stress. One of the most surest ways how we can get sick. Surest, easy. You want to follow? You want to get easy sick? Just get yourself stressed. Easy sickness, easy. Alright, and in yesterday's video, we talked about how to balance simultaneously work and study life, but essentially it's just two big commitments to prevent stress buildup. And in that video, we talked about how at first it's about recognizing that our health and that our well-being is the most important thing for us, because again, it allows us to do everything else in our life. Our health, our energy, our available force, so to say. The force is with us. Yes, the force is strong. And then we also talked about how the more stressful activities we experience and stressful events we experience, the more we have to incorporate activities that are stress relief. The more we have to incorporate things when it comes to either activities like exercise or just some movement, just some stretches. Same goes other activities that do not involve movement would be something like meditation. For example, various breathing techniques when we're sitting in position. Reconnecting through ourselves are just some of the techniques that also help to let go of stress, but these generally can be a bit more advanced. So the quickest way and the ways that pretty much works in all cases is some movement. Do something, uses physical energy, boom, it helps us to return to the state of peace. And then at the end of the video, we also talked how by quieting by limiting the external distractions and essentially putting more focus internally, we're able to understand better our perception of stress, the stress, the feelings of stress. When the stress comes, we're better able to understand our stress, and in turn also understand our perception to stressors, which is the thing that I wanted to talk about today. And boom, here we are today. Okay, so how do we deal with stressors? In the end, it again comes down to the deeper parts of us, to their deeper conditioning, to our deeper programming, to our deeper beliefs. And I'll explain, and I'll go further into the detail in this video. So, I was already talking about in the previous videos, is that stress is essentially a reaction to a threat. But not only can this threat be a real threat, like an eagle flying above. No, okay, there's no eagle, but if there was an eagle coming down, and was trying to make me its meal, I'd have stress, and it would be a real perceived threat, and I would have to, or hide, depending on the situation. But our brains also respond the same way to perceived threats. That's the thing. And when it comes to the actual production of stress and the impact of stress and the stress that we feel, perceived threats and real threats can basically have the same value, have the same ground. And this leads to us, and this leads to, we ourselves finding in situations when we are stressed because there is some perceived threat or some fear what's going to happen. And even though it's completely illogical, irrational, a lot of cases, our brains make up just completely stupid scenarios. Scenarios that are completely wrong, are not going to happen, are not valid, are not real representation of what is happening, but we make those scenarios up in our heads. I've been there too, when I just made some of the most stupidest scenarios ever, whether that be, for example, in the dating game, there was a time, it's so funny just remembering, like there was a time when I was thinking, oh, oh no, what if I die alone? What if there's nobody who loves me? What if there's nobody just to be with? And how stupid is that? It's completely stupid. But we do that, and our brains does that. And here's the reason why our brains do that. Is, again, we are wired for survival, and survival is the most important thing in life for everything, really. And so what happens is that the more negative scenario our brain can come up with, the worse the possible outcome can the brain think of. What it leads to is that the worst scenario that we can be prepared for, it means that there are higher chances of survival if it's not the worst case scenario. Making sense? So if we can think of the worst case possible scenario that can happen at any given situation, and we can prepare for that worst possible case, for the absolute worst case of scenario, it increases our chance of survival to any scenario which is less than the worst case scenario. Yes, it doesn't really make that much sense. It's not very logical, but our brains do that. Again, we're wired for survival, and our brains, even if we cannot, even in cases when we cannot find real threats to our survival, our brain is going to create new threats, new perceived threats, because we are wired to do that. We're wired essentially to look for the worst case scenario, because that increases our chances of survival. And the thing here is that the more we live from a state of stress, the more we live from a state of fear, of pain, of struggle, of self-doubt, of all these other low vibrational states, the more we live in those states, the more stronger we will focus on the negative. See, that's the thing, that's why, you see that when people are experiencing great difficulties and great fears and great challenges and great pains in life, they, start to focus on all the very, very negative things. It's natural, again, because what happens is that when we are stressed, when we are in a state of stress, the importance for survival increases naturally. It's just natural things. The more stress we experience, the higher the need for survival and, again, for safety. And at the same time, on the opposite side of the scale, so to say, is that when we're the more safe, the more in peace, the more in rest we feel, the more we can focus on our growth, on our creativity, on new things, on exploration, and no longer being so clenched up to this need for survival. Making sense? Good. I have good faith in you that I'm making sense that also you can understand well what I'm saying. Okay, moving on. And see, and I just want to give a couple of examples of what I mean when sometimes our brains make completely stupid scenarios and just stupid possible outcomes. Is, let's say we're taking work, one of the areas. What's the worst thing that can possibly happen? I get fired. I get fired from work. I mess up. I do something unintentionally. I do some mistake. It's so big that I just get fired. And I cannot find any other job. I become homeless. People leave me. I die. That's probably the, you can probably have the death sooner, you can probably die the next day, but that's about the worst case scenario we can think of. And it's just plain stupid in most of the cases, because even if we messed up in the work, even if we made a big mistake, when it comes from the employer perspective, it's a better financial decision to help the employee correct those things and not fire. But then, because when you fire, you have to get a new employee, and getting new employees are extremely cost inefficient. It takes a long time, and a lot of resources, a lot of money for training, for recruitment, for HR, all those things. So even from an economical point of view, and from all rational point of view, if you, go into the work and just flip a bird and say, hey, go pee pee, my pee pee, then it makes no sense for the employer to just fire for a mistake. Or, in relationship, again, something will bad happen, or my partner will no longer love me, they will leave me, I'll never find a partner that fits, that can ever give me the same amount of love, I'll be lonely, again, I'll die alone in pain, sadness, and suffering. Is this scenario completely stupid? Yes, it is. But do we make these scenarios? Yes, we do. And again, as I was saying, because we have this need for survival, and if we can prepare for the worst case scenario, our chances for surviving any scenario that is better than the worst case scenario are increased. It's very logical. But here's the shitty part of this whole approach, is that we essentially create our own life. We essentially create our own destiny. And if we're constantly living with this fear, what happens is that if we're constantly living, let's say, in this fear that I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get fired, I'm going to screw up, and I'm going to get fired. I'm going to screw up and get fired, I'm going to screw up and somebody's going to leave me, I'm going to get screwed up and I'm going to get abandoned. We essentially inevitably attract these situations in our lives. And it happens very subconsciously, and it starts very slowly. What it can do is that we can do, let's say, one small mistake. It again reminds us of that thing. Okay, shit. Oh no. It's again going bad. It's going to the things that I predicted. Oh, I already knew that. And we create more stress inside of us. More stress creates, and this more stress, more self-doubt, more self-deprecating talk creates more mistakes in our lives. It creates more just self-down pushing, and it essentially makes us create more mistakes. It essentially makes us less likable, because we become more suspicious, we become paranoid, we start acting cuckoo and crazy, and other people are like, yo, yeah, that dude's crazy. So this is the issue with living from this very survival-based point of view, and looking at basically the worst possible case, and looking for the worst possible things that can happen at any given situation. So, and this returns to the stressors, because stressors, what are stressors? It's a threat. It's usually a perceived kind of threat, whether it's a stressor at work, at life, at house, relationship, you name it. Any area of life, these stressors we can experience. And again, if we're going back to the fear of, oh shit, I will be fired from work because I make some mistake. There is a cause for this kind of belief. And again, the cause is deeper within us, and it comes from a deeper of a core, and it usually comes from either not us valuing ourselves. We believe we're not good enough. We believe we cannot do something good enough. We believe that we are worse than others. We believe that, what else? Yeah, essentially, we believe that we are less than other people, that we are less valuable than others. It is an internal belief. And here's the thing, a person that believes and that knows, and it's not just a belief, but it's really, we are valuable. We have such great value in us. A person that believes that and knows his internal value, even if the person makes a huge mistake at work, he's still not gonna go into this cycle of these fear thoughts that, oh my God, I'm gonna get fired. Oh my God, it's gonna be so bad. Because again, this person, he knows his value, and he knows that mistakes, so what? It does not make the person less valuable. It doesn't make me less valuable. So again, only when we have internal triggers, only when we have internal conditioning that supports this path of thinking, this path of also very fears towards these stressors, and only when there's existing already programming and conditioning that supports the great fear of these stressors, only when it is already existing within us, only then can the external stressors in life can have such a huge impact in our lives. So again, we really have to return to the core and ask ourselves these questions and get to know each other. I believe, again, I've repeated myself a couple of times, and I'm going to repeat myself a couple more times, probably more than just a couple more times, is it just self-awareness and all the time that we can spend learning about ourselves and going deeper within and truly finding out what do we want in life, what do we desire, who do we truly are, which beliefs serve us, which beliefs and which are the things that we think is true do not serve us. Because many of us, I was there too, we've grown up with this kind of very faulty conditioning, very this faulty programming. And it's inevitable that we take this programming because as children, we essentially absorb our environment. We absorbed the programming of our parents, all the beliefs of our parents, the conditioning of our parents. We absorb the conditioning of our environment. It's necessary for our survival. It's necessary for us to be able to function in a society. We do that. Yes, it's normal and it happens. And there's no shame in having these beliefs about you. These let's say these painful beliefs about yourself. There's no shame or judgment in that, you know. That's the thing. Yeah, I mean, it's sucky because I understand how it is. I was there too, and I understand how it is when you have these feelings that you're not good enough and beliefs that you're not good enough, and then you're afraid. You're afraid to even talk about these things with other people. You're afraid to express these fears because of the deep internal fear that actually may be true, you know. So for a long time, I lived my life not only feeling and believing that I was not good enough, but in deep fear that it was actually true. And so this fear really shut me down, and I was unable to just even express these things, and I was even unable really to look at these things because again I had this deep fear that me not being good enough is actually true, you know. And it's oh boy, these kinds of beliefs, it's just a jackpot for misery, so to say. But it doesn't have to be like that. We're grown up when we're as adults. We have the power, we have the capabilities to change our internal programming. And as our internal programming comes from our subconscious and relates to it, there are basically two ways how generally it can be done. I believe though that only one of those two ways is the optimal way to go, but I'll explain both. First is what I was already talking when it comes to building habits, and it's just repetition. It's the one way how we can change ourselves is through repetition. We start doing something new, repeat. That can be, for example, affirmations. That's one of the reasons affirmations can work, and they do work, just again through the repetition. But here's the thing, is that we have analytical mind that constantly checks every information that we get, and it sees whether it matches our internal programming or whether or not it doesn't match. And if an information that we come in doesn't really match our internal belief, this information is going to be blocked off. So, for example, in the case of, let's say, affirmations, if a person believes that he is not good enough, and a person starts saying these affirmations, I am good enough, I am good enough, I am good enough, there will be a small impact, but not a very big impact, because our analytical minds, you know, that checks whether or not what this information is true and valid for us, from its standpoint of the analytical mind, it looks at it a bit like, okay, but wait, we're not good enough. We believe we're not good enough, so even though we're saying we're good enough, it's not true. We're saying something wrong, so in that case, it should be rejected. Easy as that. And let's think about repetition. It can work to strengthen, but oftentimes our analytical minds will reject these positive affirmations, so to say, or this positive repetition that could help us. So, if it's the one way of repetition, what's the other way around? The other way around is essentially through practices like meditation, and here is why it works. And is it that okay, I'll be short because the video is already long. Is that we have certain brainwave frequencies. You know, we have certain brainwave frequency states. You know, the delta being the lowest one when we sleep. Then you know, going up, there's theta, which is kind of like deep meditation / dreaming / kind of deep between sleep and awake. Then going up on that, there's alpha, which is basically a state of relaxation and deep relaxation. Then above that, it's beta frequency, which is the average daily consciousness, and then above that is the gamma, when it's, you know, normally is associated with just when we process information at very high speed because our brain functions at a high frequency rate. And where I want to go with these different frequencies is that the more we can lower our frequencies of our brain, the more essentially we can bypass the analytical mind. That's why things like hypnosis and even guided meditations and affirmations in a meditative state work. Because what it happens is that the more we lower our brainwave frequencies, and essentially we have to get to the theta state of our frequencies, so kind of between sleep and awake, kind of between that state, is that when we get to that state of frequency, we essentially can bypass our analytical mind, because at that low frequency, our analytical mind starts to kind of, I don't want to say shut off, because that's not the right word, but let's say our analytical mind becomes very suggestible to new information. So, by returning to a state and by lowering our own vibration of the brain, and by entering the state of deep peace, of deep relaxation, what we're able to do is we're able to give these new suggestions for ourselves, and they're accepted by our subconscious because they basically go past our analytical brain that sorts whether or not this information is true or not based on our own existing set of beliefs. Okay, and this is where, and the end point where I want to go with all these things that I've talked about this in the video, is that by changing, that's how it first starts, by changing first the ways how we believe about our life, and the ways how we look at our life, and the beliefs that we hold about us. What it does is that it starts already the whole chain, and the same principle of, again, changing the beliefs about ourselves can be used to change our beliefs and our perception about stressors. And this in turn leads to us experiencing these stressors again, but they no longer hold the same power. Yeah? Because, see, that's the thing, because it all comes down to the perception of the stressor, how big of an impact this is. You know, it can be the same activity for one person could be just a bit of stress, nothing special, and for the other person it could be basically threat for the survival of the life. It can be perceived as if the person literally would either survive or die, whether based on the outcome of a certain situation. When in both cases it can be the exact same event and the exact same situation. So what it all comes down to, it all comes down to our internal beliefs, our programming, our conditioning about ourselves, and about our beliefs, programming, and condition about these stressors. Whew, it was a bit of a longer video. Nevertheless, I'm happy to share the information with you all. I'm very happy that you are joining me. Very happy for the questions that I receive. As you know already, I am here to help you make better educated decisions in your life. If you have any questions, if you'd like to know anything more, please, comment, send them to me, and I'll take care of the rest. For now, bye-bye, and thanks for joining. Karlis out. Hey.